top tier QBs all seem to go in rounds 4 and 5. What's your preferred draft strategy there with the position so deep? Like, are you trying to spend up in the rounds 4 and 5 for those top tier quarterbacks, or are you okay with waiting?
So this has been a really weird one for me because I'm very pro this season, especially. Very pro. You don't have to grab one of the elite guys. You can wait. It's extremely deep. You can take risk as well and maybe draft a guy that you're not sure about because when you hit the waiver wires, especially in 10-team leagues like this one, there's going to be plenty of startable streaming options every single week. So you don't have to kind of panic and you can wait it out. You don't have to jump at guys. But ironically, for me, as I'm doing mock drafts, as I'm doing my redraft leagues, I've been oddly enough taking quarterbacks early. It's not intentional. Again, it's just kind of how the boards are falling. Like in this draft, for instance, I took Kyler Murray in the 5th round. It was right after Anthony Richardson went off the board. And right before CJ Stroud. So I was kind of like smack dab in the middle of that end of the quarterback runs there in that 5th round. And it's just been really, for me, kind of relaxing drafting quarterback because you don't really feel pressure. I've been leaning into the early guys, but you don't have to. I don't feel like I'm panicked and like saying, okay, I don't like the value on this guy, but I have to take him. And it's been really interesting seeing how all of that is flowing. Oddly enough, I have been taking a QB1. I'm not going to lie. I'm going against, what I've been saying, but it's really about how the board is falling and how you want to take it because these quarterbacks can go literally anywhere throughout the draft. There's so much depth.
You're right. I think it's really about playing how the board comes to you. Because I think I had the 2nd pick in the draft and I drafted Jalen Hurts in this and it was right after Josh Allen. And you'll see throughout round 4, all of those main players, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, all of those guys went in the 4th round. So you could jump on the bandwagon and try to jump into that QB arms race. But in certain situations, if you don't have a good draft position, like if you're kind of sitting on the outskirts there, kind of like how you were just describing, like I'm okay with taking a Kyler Murray, or potentially a Jaden Daniels, someone that I want to talk about a little bit more and that you touched on as one of your risers. But I think in this QB, with the QB position so deep this year, it's really a choice of whether you want a dual threat quarterback or whether you're okay with a pocket passer. And more often than not, I find myself drafting those dual threats with a pocket passing backup. But that doesn't always unfold, especially in a 10-team league. So I think you could just play the board. If the value is there and you see a good dual threat quarterback available for you, go ahead and grab them. If they're flying off the board and you see a better valuable wide receiver or running back, I think you can go that way too, because there's just going to be so many options available for you, especially in a 10-team league. But let's go back to Jaden Daniels for a second, because what is your take on him? And is he one of those guys that you're going to be definitely targeting if you miss out on, say, these top tier QBs, or are you okay with, like, say, a Dak Prescott?
So I still love Dak. It's funny because Dak is one of the guys that's kind of like that borderline. Do I take a guy like Dak or do I reach and go for Jayden Daniels? And the more and more we go through this preseason, the more comfortable I get with reaching on Jayden Daniels because, and we've talked about this in the podcast a lot, and I talked about it with Andy Behrens last week on our Breakouts podcast, where of course Jayden Daniels was on there. I talked about him. He's everywhere, right? You can't do a podcast at this point and not talk about Jayden Daniels. But he is right at the end of that QB1 for me, around QB11, QB12. And he's the last guy that I feel inclined to reach for and that I want to snag. And then after that, I'm uncomfortable with waiting for some of the guys. I don't mind like a Jared Goff and skipping over your Tua Tagovailoa, your Brock Purdy. If you want to wait just a little bit further and push it back, there's guys like Trevor Lawrence. But I mean, Jayden Daniels has just sailed right past all these guys, right, in ADP. And we saw it in this draft where we had a nice little gap there after that kind of Kyler Murray, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson range. We had a little bit of a 2-round gap And then we had Joe Burrow, then we had Jordan Love, and then in round 9, remember 10-team league, round 9 we had Jaden Daniels go off the board. And I feel like that was a beautiful spot to take him because, I mean, if I hadn't taken a quarterback 100% and he was available, I would have done it because other guys that you're looking at in that round, there was Brian Robinson that went, Titans went that round, Evan Ingram, David Njoku. They're all fine options. Tony Pollard as well. So they're fine options, but you kind of get out of that high-end wide receiver range, and I feel like that's a great time to jump and take a risk on a guy like Jayden Daniels, who again was and the number 1 guy in my risers column this week. Just sailing, really. He's been so impressive. Again, this preseason, this last start that he had 2 series, 10 completions, 12 attempts, 78 yards, had some rushing yards on the ground as well. He's just absolutely been thriving all off season. And it's crazy. He lost Jahan Dotson in that trade. We've got that big news that came through, and now the primary target will be Terry McLaurin. I'm sure we'll talk about that later when we go to receivers. But even with the loss of Jahan Dotson, I feel like this receiving core can step up for him and really help him thrive.
I was waiting for you to mention it. That was the big news, the hot topic late last week when Jahan Dotson was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. Kind of a guy that, unfortunately just didn't amass any of the production that he had his rookie season, but he's got a new home. Perhaps Kellen Moore can unlock something a little bit more out of him. But yeah, that was gave me a little bit of concern, or maybe a little bit of hesitancy on Jaden Daniels that he was losing a pass catcher of his caliber. But I think Tera is telling you guys to get ahead of the curve, because if you look at, courtesy of 4for4, their ADP data, right now, Jaden Daniels is going in the 10th round, and she spent up a round earlier for him. So this could be the trend we see going into the holiday weekend of Jaden Daniels kind of climbing up draft boards. So after the break, we will get to the running backs, the wide receivers, and the tight ends from our latest mock draft.